Hi, this is Jade with trans-coding.com. In this episode, we're going to continue with our CSS styling and working with Bootstrap. And as part of that, we talked about how we were going to start dividing up our page into the public and the private areas that we don't want people to access. And so as part of that, I'm going to take all of my picture files, my index and resume.php, and I'm going to go ahead and move those to the public_HTML file. And then in the address for the page, I'm going to do a slash and public_HTML. And you'll note that we still have the address of the page coming up, and it links to the page correctly. And so we're going to start using this address for the page from now on, along with that folder setup, and that'll give us a little bit more control with the page from here on out. So stepping back to our resume, if you'll recall, we set up pink bars to separate the different areas of our page. And now we're going to go ahead and change some of the picture files that we've got showing. And along with changing those, we're going to add just a couple more so that we've got at least one picture for each of the areas here with a link to click and move on to so that there's an actual page that someone has a reference to when they come to your resume page. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so just to give an idea on how I'm modifying these images, I've gone ahead and I've put a style on the first image that I'm dealing with. That's the one that I'm calling the link for McGillaloans.com. And in this style, I've gone ahead and I've put a border, 3 pixels. It's a solid border, and I'm using the same color as the bordering for each of the divisions that I've got set up for my sections. In addition to that, I'm going to go ahead and add some rounded corners to these images, and that border should stick to those edges as well. So we're going to separate with a semicolon and go from there. So as you can see, if you wanted to do a simple corner on an image or any other division that you've got set up, you could use 5 pixels, 10 pixels, any number of pixels, and it would do it for all 4 corners of the image or division. If you want to set it up in a square pattern, you can actually set up each of them differently by setting up the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right corners with different setups. And as you can see when we refresh, they will all have different corners. For us, we're going to use the same corner setup for each, so we'll only use one number. And if you wanted to use a percentage, you could also use that to define a radius out from the center. For our purposes, I think 33% looks really good, and I'm going to leave it at that. If you did want to set up a border radius for a perfect circle, you would use 50% as your border radius. And you can see that would set up a nice circle, and because we still have that border on it, it gives that a nice border color. You can always remove that if you just want to have an image that's a perfect circle. I'm going to go ahead and change that back to the 33% that I want. And now, because I want all of my images to have the same type of look, I'm going to go ahead and apply this style to all of the images on my page. So I'm going to go ahead and take and cut this style from here, and I'm going to apply it to the top of the page. So if we imagine that this image is nested inside of this A link, I'm going to go ahead and apply that style the same way at the top. So I'm going to apply the style to all images that are nested to an A link. And so the way that we've set that up now, as you can see, is I've typed in the A space IMG, the open brackets, and then I've separated by a line the border and the border radius, and I've removed the word style and the quotes, and I've gone ahead and put in all of the text that was cut and pasted in. And you can see it's now been applied to all of the images on the page. Of note here, because the Black Diamond data image and the Alliance Against Cybercrime are not square images, they are not going to give perfect circle setups for a 50% radius if we put it. But it does give a nice oval shape because they are rectangle setups to begin with. So for the Megillah image, because it was a perfect square image to begin with, it does make a perfect circle in the image when it's given a border radius of 50%. Just something to keep in mind for future use. Alternately, in an image like you see here where there are letters at the bottom of it, and especially in these two for Black Diamond Data and the Alliance Against Cybercrime, you may want to adjust the border pixels on your images to make sure that those fit the letters appropriately. So we may adjust this down to 15 pixels and have a set limit so that we can ensure that the letters appear appropriately for all of the images. I think that looks good, so we'll go ahead and leave it that way for now. So in our folder I have a few more pictures set up, one for Sac State University, one for the U.S. Air Force veterans, and I'm going to go ahead and add those to the page now. Alright, also of note, because we set up the .job image as the class on all of the images previously, we can go ahead and take the styling that we did for the A-image class and we can apply that to the job images because they are all of the same setups. And now with our div setup, I can define the divisions for each of the pictures, which is going to allow me to set up their sizing a little bit more appropriately. So I can remove the width on the job image setup here, and we can go ahead and change the width on the pictures so that we can define exactly how big we would like them to be. So for this first one, I want it to take up about half the page, so I'm going to make that a col-6. And I want it to be in the center of the page. So I'm going to use an offset. So because the width of the page is going to be 12, 6 minus 12 is going to be 6, and then half of that is 3. So I want an offset of 3 in that. So I want to get this Megillah Loans picture to be in the center, and I want it to be offset by 3. And so when I do refresh the page, you can see that it's been offset to the middle of the page now on the left hand side, but the picture's gotten too big now and it looks like it's rendering at 100% of its original size. But what I want is for the image to be 100% of the size of this div size 6 or this column 6. And so I'm going to go ahead back to the job image setup, and I'm going to put the width back in. But this time, instead of doing width 49%, which seemed to be an arbitrary number, I'm going to put in width 100%. And when I do that, you'll note that the picture now occupies the exact size of a div 6. So we have 1/4 white space on the left, 1/4 white space on the right, and the rest of the space, 50% of the page, is occupied by the picture. You'll note for the rest of the images, they're still occupying the full page out to their size limits because they're set inside of a div 12 or a column size 12. So for the two images of the Black Diamond Data and the Alliance Against Cybercrime, they were in a column size 12. I'm going to have to separate them and put them into two column size 6s side by side. Alright, I like the layout on these pictures much better now. So, one other point of note is because I'm using the same color on these border sets and the horizontal rule that we've replaced, I'm going to go ahead and change the borders to the blue color that I'm using at the top of the page just so that there's some distinguishing. And I'm also going to go ahead and put a margin at the bottom of the pictures so that there's a difference between the division that comes after it and the picture itself so that it doesn't butt up against anything in the future. So you can see that change has gone ahead and put that blue border around, and it's put a little bit of space in between that blue border and the pink section holder that we've built. One other point of note, if you don't like the width at 100%, you can also use max width instead, and that will extend the picture up to the maximum width of the column defined. So you can see that this US Air Force picture is actually smaller than that width, and so it will display it at its maximum size or up to the size of the container that it's placed in. This may be better for some pictures, or if you want them to display at a specific size, you can set it to the defined width that you would like and leave it at that. It's up to personal preference on that. Alright, last few steps before we start on our nav bar. I'd like to get a little bit of space in between my sections here. So again, using margins for the section header, I'm going to go ahead and put in a margin top. And I'm also going to use the Bootstrap collapse method now. And I'm going to use that on the experience setups here so that each of these will become links and they will collapse or expand based on the click. And I may also do that with the education. We'll see how it looks once I've completed each section. So taking a look at the collapse, you can see that there's an example for the accordion here. That's the one I'm going to use. And so, as the example shows, clicking on any of the links will open them up, and if one is open and you click that already open one, it closes it. And so we'll go ahead and use that as the example. And so in this example, you can see that we're going to need a card, which is going to hold the information. We're going to need a button, which is going to be the thing that opens and closes. So this would be the button here. It says collapsible group item number 1. And you can see that's this label here. The data toggle on it is collapse. And if we scroll this window, we can take a look at some of the other information. There's an ARIA controls with an information of collapse 1. ARIA expanded is true on it. And the data target is hash collapse 1, which is going to be an ID marker. And so right underneath that, you can see the ARIA controlled by heading 1. The data parent is the accordion, and that's for the collapsible group item number 1 that has the actual information on it. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that, and we'll use it in the areas that we're going to set up. So with just a copy and paste in there, you can see it's been placed into the experience section here. And now if we take a really close look at what has been set up, you can see that when we start out on the refresh, collapsible group item number 1 has already been clicked because this is open. And we can see that in the code itself. The class is show on the first area. And up above that, on the collapsible group item number 1, ARIA expanded is set to true. Similarly, in heading number 2, ARIA expanded is set to false, and the class is not set to show. So you can see how the differences are made between group 1 and 2 to change the way the accordion is set up at the beginning. I think for our purposes, we don't want to set this up with buttons. We may be able to set it up with links instead, so that when someone clicks on the titles for our experience, they just get the accordion to open from there. And then we don't have to have a button with this highlighted area in gray or a different color, though we may come back and change things up a little bit in the future. So let's go ahead and do that now. So as you can see when we refresh our page here, we've now created a link for the team lead full stack developer, and when I click on that, it accordions out, and when you click it again, it accordions back in. A little bit of the lettering did get lost there at the end, so you need to remember that if the lettering does get lost, to assign a column 12 to it. And so again, according to that example that we had looked at before, you do need an ID to mark your accordion start. And then you need to have a button or a link that starts the accordion, some kind of ID to tell the accordion what your target is, and then the data itself. And so on the page itself, we've set up a link that is this href. The hash mark by itself specifically is a way of saying that we're not going to open a window, and so this link actually doesn't go anywhere. The data toggle is collapse, which means it starts out collapsed. This data target is going to be full stack exp, which you can see is the next set down. And the aria controls are also full stack exp. The aria expanded is set to false at start, as before. The aria labeled by is full stack exp. And the data parent is accordion, which is the ID that we've set up on this full division. The aria label sets that you see here are specifically put in place for other abled sets of browsers. So for anyone that has a disability with sight or needs the screen read out to them, that's what these aria labels are set up for. And so it's highly recommended that you use them, even though they're not required. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the rest of the page with the sets for the accordions for Senior Project, Web Dev, and so on for the rest of my experience, and go ahead and do the same for yours. I'll see you in just a moment. As a reminder here, I've copied and pasted the information that I've just used, and I want to replace only a chunk of this full stack exp. And in order to do that, I'm going to highlight the phrase full stack, and I'm going to hold down the control key, command on the Mac, and then hit D. And I'm going to continue holding down control and hit D again and again to highlight multiple copies of that phrase, and then I'm going to type in what I want to replace it with. So that replacement goes on in, and then I'm going to go ahead and make the other adjustments to this one, and then move on. Alright, now you can see we've set up our links here, and each of them expands accordingly. Great, so now that we've done that, I do want to change these link colors a little bit. I don't like the standard blue. I want to have them match the top of my link. So if you'll recall, we did call this accordion, so I'm going to use that as my ID, and these are links, so I'm going to use A, and we're going to specifically define them as links. And then I'm going to use the color property, and I'm going to use the same color as our background at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in as that hex color. And when we refresh, you'll see that those have in fact changed. Now, if you wanted to change the link on hover, you would use that instead. If this was a link that you could click on and activate later, you could use active or visited, and it would change those as well. And I'll leave that to you to look up on your own and practice with. So you can see on hover, these are changing now. But I'm going to go ahead and use just link as that keyword, and it'll leave it as that nice light pastel blue color at all times. Alright, one other thing I would like to add to the left of these links, I'd like to have a down arrow that is some kind of indicator that you can actually click on them. Some users may not know right off the bat that you can click on them, and so I'd like to figure out a way to get those on. One way that I know to do that is with Font Awesome, and so I'm going to go ahead and sign up for that. That's going to be Start Using Free, and it's not actually a sign up, it's just a link similar to what we've been using before. So we're going to use the free version, and in order to use that, we're just going to copy this link similar to what we've been using before. So I'm just going to copy that to the clipboard, and it says copy this code into the head of each template or page where you want to use it. And then in the body tag, you can use the icons there. And we'll go over how to use that in just a moment. So I'll go up into the head of my document where I've put the other links to different fonts and styles that we've placed in earlier. And at the bottom of that, I'll go ahead and paste in the style sheet for Font Awesome. And then I'm going to go back to Font Awesome's website, and I'm going to need to search for the font that I want to place in. Alright, so I've navigated to Font Awesome's gallery here, and I'm just going to search for a down arrow. So let's just search for the word down. And here we have a chevron down, we have a sort down, angle down. Here's a caret square down. I think I do like that one, so I'm going to go ahead and go with that. And so you'll see here it includes the code that we would use, so we'll just click to copy the HTML for it, and then we'll go to our page where we want to insert it. Paste that on in, and let's take a look. There it is, right to the left of our link. So one of the other things that we can do with Font Awesome is we can specify a size. I'd like that Font Awesome set right there to be just a little bit larger with our characters. So I'm going to use FA-2X, and that 2X is going to specify to use double the size that it is now. That looks a little bit too big, so I guess we'll stick with the standard sizing for now. That looks good. And because it's part of the link, it takes on the color of the link as well. If you wanted to style it specifically, you could style it inside of here, or you could style it as part of the nesting inside of the link set. And so you can see by doing that, we can change it to a different color than the rest of the link, but it still acts as a part of the link. I think I like the way that looks, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that to the rest of them as well. Next up, we're going to start on the nav bar at the top of the page, and in addition to that, we're going to change the overall look of this top header where I've got my name and my email address. I'd like to put in some kind of iconography, maybe a label that lets the user know what the page is outside of just a name and an email address. And so we'll move from there into the actual front page as well. And so that'll give our page a little bit more of a character to it, and it'll let the user know what this page is about more than just simply being a resume. So I'd like to thank you again for sticking with me through this longer episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you play around and figure out your own ways of making Bootstrap work for you, and ways of customizing your own resume and making it really pop for someone else to take a look at. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. As always, my name is Jade, and this has been trans-coding.com.